Hello and welcome to our series of tutorials on how to set up and use the scalable workflow execution engine Saasfee. In this first tutorial, we would like to demonstrate how to set up your very own Saasfee installation on a local machine or a local cluster of machines. So without further ado, let's start the web browser and head over to the Saasfee website, which is located at saasfee.informatik.hu-berlin.de. Once on the page, we'll head over to the Getting Started section, where we will find some general information on Saasfee and its installation procedure. Saasfee comprises the functional workflow language Cuneiform, as well as the Highway workflow scheduler for Hadoop Yarn. Since Highway operates on top of Hadoop, a fresh Saasfee installation, as set up in this tutorial, will include a full installation of Apache Hadoop. At the bottom of the page, we find a set of configuration files. The upper, green ones, for installing Saasfee on a local machine or a local cluster of machines, and the lower, blue ones, for installing Saasfee on Amazon EC2. Instead of going for the lightweight base installation of Saasfee, which we could download here, we're choosing a configuration file that also prepares some workflows, which we would like to showcase in later demonstrations. So let's click on the download link and get started. Note that there are other setup configurations available, for instance, for installing Saasfee on a local cluster of machines. Now that we have our configuration at the ready, we need some software to make sense of this configuration and actually perform the installation. This is where Caramel comes into play, which we can download from the Caramel website at caramel.io. On the Caramel website, we'll head over to the Getting Started section, where we follow the download links for the Caramel binaries. As you can see, the Caramel website provides extensive information on what Caramel is and how to use it. For this demo, it suffices to say that Caramel is an orchestration tool for setting up distributed architectures. Once the Caramel download has finished, we look into our Downloads folder, where we will find our configuration file, as well as the Caramel binaries, which we'll now extract. Before we can run Caramel, we'll have to make sure that Java is installed. If Java is not installed, we can install it like so. For Caramel to run properly, we also have to make sure that an SSH server is running on all the target machines. In this case, the target machine is identical to the one that Caramel runs on. We can check if an SSH server is running like so. As we can see, we need to install the SSH server. Let us then also create the folder in which public and private keys are to be stored. We can run Caramel by starting a terminal, going into the folder we extracted Caramel into, and entering bin/caramel. This will launch an instance of Caramel in our web browser. We continue by loading our configuration file, which we find in the Downloads folder. Earlier in this demonstration, we decided to go for a single node installation of Saasfee. We can alter the IP address of the target machine on which to install Saasfee in the provider settings like so. In this case, we're installing Saasfee on the local host, that is, the machine on which Caramel operates. We can then also configure our Saasfee installation to tailor it to the infrastructure on which it is to be installed. Here, we're installing Saasfee on a machine with about 4 GB of main memory and 3 cores. Hence, it could make sense to increase the resources provided to Hadoop to say 4 GB and 3 virtual cores. We'll ignore the other configuration settings for now, press Add, and then hit the Launch button. Caramel installs Saasfee by logging into the target machine or machines via SSH, downloading the required packages, and configuring the installation. Hence, we have to provide it with a set of SSH keys which allow for passwordless SSH connection to the target machines. If you have set up passwordless SSH yourself, you can ignore this part of the demonstration. If you did not, the easiest way is to generate a new key pair by pressing the Generate Keys button. Now all that remains to be done is adding the public key to the list of authorized keys on the target machine or machines on which we want to install Saasfee. With this out of the way, all that remains to be done is setting the sudo password. Caramel requires a sudo password on the target machines since it will install new software on these machines. Once we've provided Caramel with all the required information, we can press Submit. This brings us to a new window where, when clicking on the status link, we get more detailed information on the installation progress. Caramel will now install Hadoop, Highway and Cuneiform on the target machine, so let's wait for a little bit. After a couple of minutes, the installation is done. We can now close Caramel by right-clicking on the Caramel icon and pressing Exit. To check if Hadoop was installed correctly, let's access Hadoop's web interfaces in our browser by entering the localhost IP and port 8088 for Yarn's Resource Manager or 570 for Hadoop's distributed file system HDFS. We can also run a simple Hello World workflow programmed in Cuneiform from the terminal by entering cuneiform helloworld.cf. If the workflow is to be run on Hadoop instead, we would enter highway -w helloworld.cf. This will submit the workflow to Hadoop, where we can track its progress via the Yarn web interface. After a couple of seconds, the workflow should have terminated. This brings us to the end of this demonstration. We've learned how straightforward it is to set up a local Saasfee installation, including the Cuneiform workflow language, the Highway workflow scheduler, and Apache Hadoop. For further demonstrations on workflow design, editing, and execution, please check our webpage and our YouTube channel. Thanks for your attention and see you around.